Welcome to Arizona Sports at Night, inaugural programming here on 98.7 FM, the local sports leader. My name is Kellan Olson, and I'm going to be joined by Mitch Vareldzis for this program we are debuting tonight. Hi, buddy.
Kel, we made it.
We're
here.
You and I have been chomping at the bit ever since we got word of this, ever since it was announced. For those of you listening straight after Burns and Gambo, we really do appreciate you sticking with us and hope you will on select weeknights. Burns and Gambo will let you guys know when those select weeknights are. Again, basically, if there isn't programming coming up from the game side, the game broadcasting side, we will be here to talk you through it. You can go to our X page that is at AZ Sports Night to get the plug out of the way right now. We're going to be tweeting our schedule out there every single week. So if you want to keep track of the show, you can do it there and listen to us live, or you can go to our podcast feeds, and those are already up and established and ready to go.
Honestly, the Twitter account is just the easiest way to keep up with our show and to keep up with it's the best way to interact with us is what I'm trying to get at, because there's a bunch of different ways that we want you to be involved with this show as well, and we want you to know when we're live, but you also have the freedom to listen to it at your own will, and we try to make it so that this is a conversation that it's going to last for a few days, right? We're not just talking about something that's going to be immediately impacted by the next slate of sports, right? We're looking for podcast content here.
If you're in your car and you hear 15, 30 minutes or whatever, and you're not going to go back and listen to the rest of the show that night, that's okay. Go to your podcast feed. If you want to hear us talk about ASU, for example, and hear me complain and moan about the way U of A looked and revel in my dismay at the football program down there, you can go to our podcast feeds. We'll have timestamps there and everything. Of course, today we have to start with the Arizona Cardinals, 34-28 loss in Buffalo. There are so many different ways for us to unpack this game, and we are going to do so on tonight's program, Mitch, but we got to start with Marv. 3 targets, 1 catch, 4 yards. Where do you want to start within where we are going to start, which is with Marv and his lack of production here? One that was rightfully so, justifiably so, had a ton of hype behind it. We didn't see him in the preseason. This number 4 overall pick, this huge weapon, the Maserati known as Marv. And they kept it in the garage.
He was doing a lot of speeding, but he wasn't getting a lot of opportunities to really show off what he could do. And I think that's my biggest gripe is this offseason was built up to the draft, right? Everything that we knew about the Cardinals going into this year and what we saw yesterday, a lot of it was building up to the draft and that number 4 overall pick and a lot of the connecting the dots. And, hey, there's a top wide receiver coming out of the game, and they're adamant that this is the quarterback they want, so why not get him the offensive help that he needs? Clearly, they didn't need his help on Sunday, it would appear. They only targeted him 4 times, and if you go back specifically into the snap counts, he was on the field for 95% of the offensive snaps, and he got targeted 4 times. It's a massive disparity for what we were expecting Sunday.
Yeah, to really go inside baseball, which is what we're going to be doing a ton on this show, I went in and watched all of the routes that Marv ran. He ran 33 of them. I would say on roughly half of these, Mitch, he was double-teamed, which I don't think is a surprise. We're going to expect
we should not
him
be
to
surprised that he was doubled.
And as Burns and Gambo were talking about a lot during their show today, and everyone was talking about on their show today, that's what these guys see. That's what Justin Jefferson sees. That's what Tyreek Hill sees. That's what Garrett Wilson tonight is going to be seeing for the Jets. That's what Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are going to be seeing some sort of level on for San Francisco. You've still got to get him the ball in that situation. Now, I counted 11 of those routes when Marvin Harrison Jr. was technically open, which you're hearing that and you're getting frustrated right now because 3 targets, 11 times he was technically open. What happened? I picked 3 of those plays where Marv was open, but something else was the read and something else productive happened, which is some of what we're going to be getting into here. If you're going to use him as a quote-unquote decoy, everyone is used in that kind of way when they bring the sort of defensive gravity, to use a basketball term in football, where he is going to bring guys over. You might remember that big 24-yard catch for Amari DiMercato. There were 4 guys in the orbit of Marvin Harrison Jr., 4 defenders, and DiMercato had that entire sideline to himself. That was because of Marv. That was because of the coverage that they were running. 6 of those, and this is where I get concerned, were collapses in the pocket and a blitz. Some combination of that. That's going to happen every night. That's fine. But when over half of the times that he was open, you couldn't get him the ball because you didn't have enough time in the pocket, whether it's the way the blitz ran out or the pocket collapsed with the lack of offensive line play there. I don't know. And then there are 2 there that they're just going to want back. You'll actually remember a positive result, which was Michael Wilson catching that touchdown and you getting something out of it. Marv cut in right behind him where he was, but Kyler was initially looking at Michael Wilson, not looking at Marv. Marv was open for about a half second. The window was there. Great quarterbacks always make that throw, and they don't. All of this is to say, Mitch, and I'm making this long expanded point here for a reason. I only counted 3 plays where I saw Kyler look at him right away, a.k.a. he was the first read.
Yes.
That is not nearly enough. Now, if your offense is designed around taking a large part of that gravity and turning it into a positive for their team, which is what a lot of what Petzing did, and it looked like he was doing, in my opinion, on Sunday, that's fine. But what you cannot do is lose him throughout the game, because guess what? All 3 of those were in the first half. I didn't count one play in the second half where they looked at Marvin, they were trying to get him the ball, and it's what worked. There were some of those plays, again, where he was taking on coverage, and he was open in other areas for Trey McBride, or Greg Dortch was finding some space because of him. That's the most concerning part of all of this for me, is that you saw at halftime you only got him the ball once. You only found him 3 times for targets. It really should have been 2 catches. He had to drop. Everything happens. They reference it on the broadcast. Jamar Chase dropped his first pass too, all that kind of stuff, yada, yada,
Things
and so
happen.
on. But you weren't able to go into the locker room at halftime and highlight, let's get Marvin Harrison Jr. the freaking ball, and then find it for him in the second half. Because not only did they not do that, it didn't look like, to me, watching the game back and zooming it out to get the angle of where the secondary was and all that kind of stuff, that they focused on getting him the ball. And it has to be your focus. If you're not a team that is going to get the most out of Marvin Harrison Jr., then what are you doing drafting him? That is a take for week 9. Don't get me wrong. We're in week 1. Calm down. It's only one game. He's going to get the ball a lot more. But now we are going to be watching and absolutely laser locked in week 2 and looking at where Marv is. Is he getting open? Are they finding him the ball? That's going to be in Arizona. So a lot of fans there aren't even going to be watching Kyler Murray, I bet. They're going to be watching Marvin Harrison Jr. against the corner that he's up against.
I think another big part of why there was such limited opportunities, let's call it. I've been trying to find the proper phrasing as to how I want to describe what it was, whether it's opportunities, production. I figured that opportunities was the right word. They couldn't really establish their running game. And it's very hard for an offense to generate those big flashy plays or opportunities for your best offensive weapon if you can't at least establish a solid run game. And that was something that we noticed, Kel, is that James Conner wasn't really looking like himself for the most part. I'm very confused about the snap distribution between Trey Benson and Amari DiMercato. They seem to like the way it's distributed. I don't, personally.
We saw some of that last night where Blake Corum, a lot of attention was on him. Those
Right.
rookie running backs can take some time. But again, you're not talking about some hyper-talented third stringer that you're talking about, to be fair to Amari DiMercato, and then the kid from last night for LA as well.
They took Trey Benson with a top 100 pick, and he was a starting running back at Florida State. I don't know how much more, and I don't want to pretend I'm smarter than a head coach or a GM. We're armchair dudes, but at the same time, you invest as much as you do in this player, you might as well use him. And that leads us back to the whole center of this conversation. You invested the 4th overall pick in Marvin Harrison Jr., and you're not even calling plays where he is the number 1 read for the quarterback that you're supposed to be developing this chemistry with.
Did you watch Mythbusters growing up?
A little bit every now and then.
Let's bust one myth right now. The myth going around right now is that the offensive line was not giving Kyler enough time. Again, I mentioned some of those plays that were collapses and blitzes. There were 13 quarterback pressures for the Buffalo Bills. I went back and watched all 13 of those. In those 4 pressures, only 4 of them I counted were legitimately like Kelvin Beachum getting beat or whatever. There was the sack with Von Miller, which is like, it's Von Miller.
He kind of like reached his arm out, and that was the sack.
He's going to do that, but the average time to throw, so the amount of time that the quarterback took to make their throw, not the amount of time they had in the pocket, Kyler ranked number 1 in football so far. We'll see what happens in San Francisco and for the Jets as well, but 3.19 seconds was the amount of time that he took per throw. Tops by a pretty big margin. If you go down to like the guy in 10th, it's 2.82. You're typically looking at 2.5 to 2 3/4 seconds for that average amount of time to get off a throw. Kyler was able to take a lot of time in these games, but he wasn't able to find that time to locate Marv, or they weren't able to use plays where they were going to locate Marv. And then the other concerning stat for me was the average air yards. You're looking at where the ball travels through the air, how long does it. So, for example, that Michael Wilson touchdown, it was like a 4-yard touchdown, I believe, but the air yards there were a little bit longer.
Right.
Kyler had the 5th lowest average completed air yards per game yesterday. That is ranking behind Caleb Williams, Deshaun Watson, Bo Nix, and Jaden Daniels. Those guys are not very good at football.
3 of them are rookies, by the way, if we're going to point that out right now.
And look, Kyler is ranking around Patrick Mahomes last year in that category, and Patrick Mahomes is awesome. So let's not take it as, oh, Kyler deserves to be lumped in with those guys. What I'm trying to say here is, especially given the comparisons, all those guys like Jaden Daniels, his average air yards was 1.6. He was taking 2.35 seconds to throw the ball, which is nearly a full second less than Kyler was. Kyler was getting the time, and he wasn't really taking advantage of it. Like Jalen Hurts was up there with him on time to throw. He was throwing like 5.5 yards per completion there. So those are some really in-depth numbers, though, to just really magnify that. Again, you might think that the offensive line was letting them down. He had time to throw, and to me, to bring it all back, that tells me that in week 2, especially without Aaron Donald, they are going to have time to find Marvin on the second or third read, and Kyler is going to look his way more possible. But this is the funny thing about sports, and the difficult thing here, Mitch, is you can't overcompensate. Now you can't just have your whole offense revolve around Marv. You still got to have your identity. The Cardinals are not going to do that. I trust them not to do that. But
well, they didn't do it in the first game. And this
true.
this is what we're frustrated about. It's like you invested as much as you did in a guy and you barely involved him in your offense. And I don't understand, because one of the big talking points about the Bills is they basically restructured their entire defensive back room. I have a hard time believing that the Cardinals offense couldn't at least script, let's say 5 plays coming out of the half that were first read Marvin Harrison Jr. on their first offensive drive. Especially because when you went back specifically and weren't finding a lot of like first read opportunities for Marvin in the second half, that's concerning to me that they weren't even trying into going into that direction.
Can I give you some good news?
Sure.
He looked really good. When I was just watching him run routes, he looked real good. It's like, yep, this is the guy that everyone's hyping up. When we were in those situations I was talking about where the blitz was coming or the pocket was collapsing, he was getting open, and it was in a way where the defensive back was making sure, like, okay, I know that you can burn me at any second, so I'm fine with you getting these 15 to 18 yards, sir, Mr. Maserati Marv. Just don't burn me down the street. Don't go in whatever 0.03 or 2.7 seconds to get to whatever that Maserati Marv will do, and we'll see him do all year. I'm not too concerned about seeing it in the end, Mitch.